me honestly, how much truth is there in these claims? Because if this is true, we could be on the brink of an absolutely phenomenal change in the world. So once again, I'm going to start right from you.
Super. I think it's important to put this down this way. There are 5 parts of this plant that we're talking about. One is a seed, one is a fiber, one is the leaf, one is the bud, which is the cannabis flower, and then there is a resin from the flower. NDPS Act in India clearly demarcates the fact that seed, fiber, and the leaf are all exempt from the bracketing as a narcotic. So they are all permitted to be used. Now, growing hemp is a 90 to 120 day process. It is, all of India is already got a weed crop like hemp growing in its backyard. So the farmer doesn't have to do much. We are already, it's one of the most underutilized yet abundantly available fiber and seed in India at the moment. So it grows in 90 to 120 days. It grows 12 feet tall. At least hemp grows 12 feet tall. And it has 25,000 proven applications. To address the point that you raised, one of the best properties that hemp has is that it actually fixes the soil. So when one wants to grow the plant in this country, they can grow it even in alteration. They don't have to grow it as a mainstay. And when they do that, for their next cycle of growing, it actually remediates the soil and makes it much more fertile to grow the next season on. So I think that is probably one of the best, and also typically it consumes a lot of, it soaks in a lot of carbon dioxide, so it's really good for the planet in general.
Thank you. One last thing before I move on to you. Sorry, tell me about basically plastic, and I think that can be a real game changer. Would you like to tell me, any of you, about the plastic part of how hemp could take over plastic use?
So yeah, so see, hemp as a fiber or as a fiber is one of the longest fibers that is available on the planet. That is naturally occurring. There are only, I think, a couple more stronger and longer fibers that are available. The issue with the plastic industry right now is that we rely so much on petroleum for our use of, manufacturing of plastic, that it is unsustainable. And it does not really go away very quickly. Even if you decompose plastic, you still have the threat of microplastics and whatnot filling up the environment. So when we manufacture the same plastic with hemp, and the process is simple as any other bioplastic, right? But the point being, it is a stronger plastic that you create. It has less microplastics that go out into the environment and continue polluting. It is abundantly available, so you don't have to dig through the Earth's resources to keep manufacturing it. A 120-day growth cycle, in a way, ensures that you have at least 4 cycles from the same, patch of land. So that means you can at least have 4 times more plastic manufactured compared to whatever you are actually doing. And another important thing that is linked to plastic is also the use of hemp as paper alternative. So instead of cutting down trees to create timber paper, you can actually grow a lot more cannabis and use that fiber to create a lot more paper as well. So
just to add there, right? Like a tree takes about 20 to 25 years to grow, and you chop that tree to make paper, right? The US, the entire, US declaration of independence, was, written on hemp paper, right? And a hemp takes about 4 months to grow. So,
Chirag, you did mention the legalities of this, because I need to, in a previous life, I was a lawyer. I want to ask a couple of legal questions. But before I do, for our audience, I don't want to get too jargonistic in this whole process. So you're talking about products, right? It's a plethora of products. You're talking about animal husbandry, grooming, medicine, construction, automobiles, apparel. If someone is coming to join this industry, maybe join this panel next time around when we're talking, what's the most profitable? You mentioned ecologically feasible. What's the most profitable section of this industry, Chirag, to really get into?
Right. Thank you for getting to the commercial aspect of this. Overseas and across the globe, the highest amount of value one has found from the crop has been from the medical and wellness related applications of this. The globe has made more than $1 billion when this crop was actually or belonged first to the Himalayas, which we share a part of as well. The world has harnessed this particular crop and made more than $1 billion industry primarily in the medical and recreational spaces. Over the years, what we have done in India to bring about that or walk that curve a certain way is that obviously when we started off, the lowest hanging fruit was to popularize hemp as a fiber and build out the textile value chain, because India innately is a textile economy. Once we were able to do that, and thanks to Ministry of Ayush, which is the presence of Ayurveda actually spiritually, culturally, and historically identifies what's known as bhang, which is the leaf of the cannabis plant, for 5,000 plus years. So one can, and Ayurveda is not a reductionist science, so it's not the allopathic route, but it's a holistic science, which means what they do is they say you can use the leaf of the plant in its entirety and make medicines of it. So whether it's the whole pain segment, arthritis, we've got sleep, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, insomnia related disorders, all can be cured with the presence of a hemp-based leaf product.
I'd like to add in a little bit. So let's leave the global scale aside for a bit. Just consider India as a country. There are over 400 million menstruating women. There are over 200 million chronic pain patients. There are over 100 million high-stress employees. All of these people, and add to it the fact that India is one of the most depressed countries in the world right now, with 1 in 5 people suffering from depression or anxiety or some sort of a mental disorder. Having a natural alternative, a natural solution to lifestyle disorders is paramount for any individual. And cannabis, as of right now, with Ayurveda, gives us that opportunity to create that space where people can work on their mental problems and realize that, okay, this is something that is a legitimate natural solution. Instead of relying heavily on opioids or any sort of drugs in whatever manner, getting a natural, non-addictive solution to a lifestyle disorder is a major gameplay, both commercially and as a humane thing to do as well.
In terms of legal acceptance, I think there's a lot of interesting, and I wanted you to weigh in on it as well, Lavina. Around the world, different jurisdictions, different countries look at this differently. Even in India, we have certain states that view this very differently. I'm guessing there's a lot of historic and cultural significance there as well. But when we look at what's happening maybe in China across the border, right, it's a very different story. Not too far away, but a very different view on this. In terms of a regulatory and a legal acceptance sort of a view, when we're talking about India, how can we make this more acceptable and ubiquitous?
So if you look at the law that's present in the country today, cannabis is governed by the NDPS Act of 1985. India is actually one of the most federally legal countries in the entire world. So every state has an autonomy to make its own decision when it comes to governing the use, the transport, consumption and possession of cannabis as a plant. I believe in terms of the law that's already present, I think when it comes to the act in itself, it's already fairly strict. And I think we need to move away from while we have a fairly liberal law. I think we need to move away from if you look at the United States, and if you look at the US diplomats that had made us implement this fairly strict, which is one of the strictest policies in place in the country, the conversation even overseas has shifted away from criminalizing consumptions in small amounts, away from criminalizing it and towards making it a conversation around public health. If you look at the White House, right, per se, the national conversation has moved away from criminal law around cannabis to advocating for it for public health. Same way, I believe in India as well, we need to have, there is a misconception that if we have a strict criminal law, that will fairly hold us back from consumption. We need to acknowledge the fact that there are going to be people that are going to be experimenting with it or consuming it in small amounts. But the conversation has to move away from, it's not so much about the law and order anymore, while yes, it is governed by it, but it is more so about the well-being of our people. And I feel like today we have a moral obligation to put that into consideration, because irrespective of people consuming it or not, I think the law needs to sorry, I'm just going to take a second to collect my thoughts. But what I'm trying to say is, because it's we need to focus more on the welfare of our
Absolutely.
people, and that's where we need to move
I'm going to
towards.
be handing it over to Nandini now, but before I do, just so that the audience gets a little bit more of an anecdotal sort of an experience of what you guys go through on a daily basis. We live in India, multicultural, fascinating country that we live in. But Chirag, I'm guessing you're based out of here in Mumbai. When the authorities or anyone from government offices have to deal with you, I'm guessing there must be some anecdotes where there's some interesting conversations to be had.
Yeah, of course. So there's the government and then there's consumers, right? So a few fun stories when we first started. We used to take part at these flea markets, exhibitions and conferences where we used to exhibit our products. We started in 2013 as a company, and the first time we exhibited hemp clothing or apparel and accessories, we found a large amount of audiences walk into our stores and actually start smelling the fabric, right? So they wanted to understand if it actually resonates with the smell of bhang, which is what we call it, bhang ke kapde, right? And over the course, I think one of the first meetings we had was on the 7th of Feb 2014. I distinctly remember it was at the North Block Department of Revenue, Ministry of Finance. And we were asked to come in and give them an entire laydown or lowdown rather on what the world has done with this crop. And to our surprise, a lot of the officials that belong to several parts of this country that were invited for that knew a lot of what we were already presenting. Everybody knew. Obviously, we had to take a salad, we had to take a brick, and we had to take this T-shirt to show them roti, kapda, makan, all out of one crop, which is known as cannabis or bhang in this country. But when that happened, they were all pretty amazed and very reciprocative to what we were asking for, right? And a large part of the central government already points to the direction that state has the powers, as Lavina just alluded to. And I think that makes it very conducive for a very thriving and flourishing economy for cannabis in the country.
Fabulous. And I love that line about roti, kapda, makan, all from cannabis. Okay, we have
Or
only
Davai,
time.
or Davai.
Davai, and also that. We are down to our last question, which will really be about where from here. Currently, China is the world's #1 hemp basically producer, correct? And do you think that in the next 5 years, of course, we just talked about basically legal issues, we just talked about all kinds of basically government changes which must be looked into, but since you're all experts and since somebody actually just called them the Mal High Club, that was a very, very cute name to be giving, but do you see in the next 5 years, 10 years, can basically India look at getting to that level, taking that spot, #1 spot, super quickly, each of you, 30 seconds about what it will take to make that change, and can it actually happen?
So I'll go ahead, right? So if you look at the entire global market, it's a $40+ billion market, right? And before the entire NDPS Act, India was actually one of the global leaders in this space. Even the word indica originates from the word India, right? It's like a very interesting fact there. And if you see, India only occupies a 0.00001% of that global market, which is nothing, though India has a great competitive advantage, we have a great climate, we have good soil, we have a great labor force. So India, so here I'm not seeing the vision of India just like participating in the industry, but here we are looking at like a vision, and the way that we should make our legislation and law is to make India a global leader in this space, not just participate in the industry, right? Just like our neighbors, like in China, they are dominating this market right now.
Thank you.
And to further add to that, 58% we're a land of traditional medicine, and 58% of our livelihood depends on the agricultural economy. Hemp as a crop can really be a great solution for our farmers' livelihood. And you have increasing suicide rates because of, and you have cases where farmers are relocating from one state to another because of a better standard of living. Whereas hemp can well challenge, let's say, the monopoly of even cotton. And I think not just for the farmers alone, but since they form such a large part of our ecosystem, right from our farmers to our consumers, as well as the patients that are well benefiting from its medical uses, all the way to our government and the economy as a whole. I think hemp can really be the billion-dollar crop that it is.
I have a little time up flashing board, so super duper quickly.
So we're living in a journey of cannabis in this country where educate, cultivate, elevate is the most important aspect that the country needs. We've already come far enough to cultivate cannabis. We just recently grew 0.3% THC plants in Uttarakhand, which is one of the biggest achievements the country saw. Now it's time to elevate everyone who belongs to the industry, to all the Indian consumers. We want to live in a world, and in 5 years from today, we will see that. We want to live in an India where arthritis, brain cancer, insomnia-related disorders, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's are all being cured by our own plant in the backyard known as bhang, and data and clinical trials are being conducted to make sure that happens.
India, being one of the largest consumer markets in the world, obviously is a set stage for a crop like cannabis, which is indigenous to the country, which has a lot of use cases within the country itself. Even if you don't have to go outside, even if we exclude exports for a while, within the country we have this potential to create a billion-dollar market. And considering that Himalayas is one of the key words in our industry, so to say, the export market and people who are interested in investing in an industry to grow in India is huge outside India as well. So in 5 years, I see there is a strong possibility that India can be one of the world leaders in cannabis and hemp industry.
Fascinating insights. I think that's about all the time we have. You said educate, elevate. We've been entertained over the time as well, yes. And of course elevated, and we're all a lot more educated when we're talking about the future of hemp, the future of bhang. That's not a taboo anymore. We can say that after this panel. And thank you so much for being such a lovely panel. Thank you, Nandini, for being such a lovely host, and thank you for being such a fascinating audience. Thanks so much, guys.
And also, please adopt cannabis products. It really helps.
Thank you, Ayush. Raj, could I request you to join us to share a token of appreciation with our panelists?